Merciful Heavenly Father, we thank thee and praise thy great and glorious name for this beautiful day that you prepared for us, for this opportunity to come about and to consider thy holy word, to learn more about thy people and the many trials and tribulations they've gone through, how we might see thy hand in everything that happens about them, and how you guide and protect them and keep them safe. We long for the day when thy Son will return and establish thy kingdom here upon the face of this earth, and this people that you've called out by your name, that they may soon be yours and occupy the land, and that great and wonderful kingdom be established. Until that time, find us watching, guide us, direct us, help us to care for thy people and for one another. We thank you for all things in and through the name of thy Son, Jesus the Christ. Amen.
Thank you very much. So thank you for joining us tonight. And can you tell me who we have online so I have some idea?
Yeah, we have Brother David and Nancy Boston.
Okay.
We have Gerald and Susie Sankey. We have Sister Patsy and Sister Fonda and hopefully Mike and Sister Joanne.
Okay, you're going to be in charge of assigning reading assignments.
Yep, no problem.
Okay, so we talked about what the Aliyahs were between the two world wars, World War I and World War II. There were 5 Aliyahs starting in the 1890s.
What's an aliyah?
Oh, yes, an Aliyah is, it's a good question. It is an expression now meant to talk about immigration of Jews to Israel, specifically Jews to Israel. What it actually means, an Aliyah, is when they go up to Jerusalem. So that term is going up to Jerusalem.
Come, let us go up to the mountain of the house of God.
So these were the Aliyahs, and I was explaining to them all this is in preparation for the people coming back to the land. So we talked about Milk last week, who was in charge of all of the agricultural education. And Cam Weisman we also discussed, but this was Walter C. Loudermilk, and he wrote Palestine, Land of Promise. He was an American, worked for Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and he came there and told them how they could conserve their soil, get it prepared. And this is like, what I compare it with is like somebody coming before we landed in Jamestown in 1607 and preparing a university, getting all the ground ready for us to farm. I mean, that's what it would be like. And he went in there and did all this groundwork ahead of time, which is just absolutely incredible.
Was he a Jew?
No, he was not, as far as I know. But he was just really super excited about the Jews coming back to Israel. He says they were bright spots in the desert. And then Cam Weisman, or Chaim Weisman, however you want to say it.
You can go, Chaim.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to spit all over everybody. So Chaim Weisman was the chemist who developed the formula for acetone, and he gave it to the British Empire during World War I, which allowed them, because they had to have this special kind of a special kind of mineral to make acetone, and that's for munitions. It's not just for you removing your paint from your nails. Acetone actually was used in munitions.
What was the purpose of the acetone? What did it do for the gunpowder or something?
Yeah, it was made for making all kinds of munitions. I don't know how the chemical is used. I just know that they needed it by the ton. I mean, millions and millions of tons of acetone. So he gave them the formula to turn organic material into acetone. So all the refineries and all of the distilleries in England were shut down and turned into acetone factories. So that's like just amazing. So he knew both Winston Churchill, and he convinced him to do the Balfour before him, actually, the Balfour Declaration was because of Chaim Weisman. And then he was also friends with President Truman, and he got him, coerced him into signing for Israel becoming a nation. And then we showed, this is my big image to talk about what Christ said to his disciples. When you see the blossoms forming on all the trees and the olive tree, then you know I'm right at the door. So if you look at that map, you see the Ottoman Empire was there for 400 or 500 years. After World War I, all those nations came into being. 1918, 1923, 1943, 1922, 1961. All of them came pretty much into being all around or before World War II or slightly after. And Israel's kind of the last one that does. And that was all because of the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which we talked about last time. And we talked about the Aliyahs before the war. We also showed in Jeremiah 16 and Jeremiah 30, these passages actually, this is for your recap for you two in the room, because they've already heard all this. This is where I think it is actually talking about the Holocaust. So it's in Jeremiah chapter 16. And it says they'll die from deadly diseases. They'll be mourned. They will not be mourned or buried. They will be like manure on the face of the earth. They will be finished off by the sword and famine, and the corpses will become food for the birds of the air and the sky and the wild beasts on the land. And then continuing, it talks about the cup of desolation. They will not enter the house where the feasting is taking place to sit with the rest and eat and drink. But this is what the Lord of hosts says, the God of Israel, I am about to eliminate from this place before you and your very eyes in this time the sound of joy and gladness and the voice of the bride and the groom. So they're not going to enter the house of mourning. That's actually a painting there of one of the mass pit graves. And this is what's going on in Ukraine right now. They just found another grave, mass grave of Ukrainian civilians, 4,000 people buried in the ground together. So it's happening again, and we should be horrified, and nobody is. It's like, oh, I've got to go catch my trains. But anyway, and then 16 tells you more about what their guilt was and why God was hurling them from this land and why they were being persecuted. And then the punishment for exile is here. And then we also talked about Jeremiah 30, which is, I think this is the one that talks about the man with his hand on his stomach and they looking pale. Yeah, it's verse 5.
Question.
Yeah.
Were these people in this mass grave that they just found, were they any particular nationalities or I mean, I know they were Ukrainians, but were they Jews or were they just all the different peoples?
Well, they're still pulling them out and identifying them. I mean, it's not like the Russian put tags on them when they throw them in. They're just killing innocent civilians and chucking them in a hole. So you have to be a pathologist to figure out who they are. And then you have to put pictures of dead people on sites and hope somebody from the family can identify them. It's just
wondering if they were Jews or not.
I don't know, because like I said, it's a mass hit of dead civilians and they have to pull them out one by one and try to identify who they were. So it's very tragic. So anyway, so we come to the Havara transfer agreement. This blew my mind when I read about it. I still can't believe it. So Cam Orlosarov was living, I believe, in Ukraine, which we were just talking about. He moved to Tel Aviv in 1924, but before he went to Tel Aviv, he got his PhD in economics in Germany. Who was his girlfriend while he was in college? Magda Rischel. And then when he went to Israel, who did she marry? Joseph Goebbels, who is the chief propagandist under Adolf Hitler, who promoted him, did all of his speeches, did all of his televised interviews, radio addresses, everything. He wrote all of his speeches. So when he gets to Israel, he's like, I got a great idea. The Germans don't want the Jews. We want them. Let's get them out of there with their money before it's too late. So he sets up this transfer agreement. And what happens is this. They say, he actually called his girlfriend, Magda. He says, who do you know in the Nazi high command? I want to come meet him. I'm like, this is during the middle of World War II. A Jew from Palestine is going into Germany to go talk to the Nazi high command. Unthinkable, but that's exactly what happened. She gave him the number, he called, he went, and they set up this transfer agreement. So rich German Jews who were living in the land during the time of Hitler were able to sell everything they had. They were able to liquidate the property. All the money went to a bank in Palestine. Palestine's government used the money to buy German goods, which they needed to sell, but Israel was in the middle of a boycott at the time. Then bring the goods to Israel. Merchants would buy them and sell them, and the money would go back to the families who were German Jews who had moved to Israel. Get it?
That's a long process.
It is. It's extremely complicated. So to run through it again, there's a boycott in Israel against German goods, but Chaim Arlosov basically says, will take the Jews who are living there. They sell their homes, their clothes, their furs, their chauffeurs, everything. Then they come here. We take the money from the sale, put it in a bank in Palestine. Palestine's government buys the goods from Germany that nobody else will buy because they're not in agreement. Bring them to Israel, which they desperately needed the goods. Give them to merchants. Merchants would take it and buy them, and the money would go back to the families.
Ah,
So
wow, that's pretty cool.
yeah, so this Havara transfer agreement was a limited last window for people to get out. There's lots of little sinews, but this was a pretty main vein to get out if you could. So in June 1933, after having risen to the top of the Yeshuv's leadership, and the Yeshuv refers to the Jews who were in Palestine before it was a nation, Orlosov returned to Germany to negotiate with German officials, apparently using contacts through his former mistress to gain access to the people he needed to see. So old girlfriend, married to Joseph Goebbels, gives him the insider information. Here's the top brass to see why you're here, to make this agreement. His mission in Germany was to advance a plan called the Havara, which is the transfer agreement that would allow German Jews to leave Germany without having to forfeit all their assets. So this is a major reason why a lot of Jews didn't leave, because of the assets that they had. And they kept thinking it was going to get better. It was going to get better, and it didn't get any better. So these are actual transfer agreement paperwork from back in the day. The Jews immigrated from Germany would deposit their money in a fund that was made available to Palestinian banks. So they sell everything they own, their cars, their homes, their clothes, their assets, and they deposit all in a bank in Palestine. Those banks would then purchase German goods that were shipped to Palestine. Why? Because they needed them. In Palestine, merchants would purchase the goods, and the money from the purchase would then be returned to the Jews that had immigrated from Germany. So you got it? They're not going to get it all back, but they at least get a portion, maybe 50 cents on the dollar, maybe 25 cents on the dollar.
Well, that seems like it was God's reward for going back to the land of Israel.
Yep.
You know, which is what he wanted.
So here's an actual certificate of the Havara. Everyone seemed to benefit. Germany got rid of the Jews it did not want. The Yeshuv benefited from the influx of immigration, and the Jews who departed Germany would keep some of their assets, and the Palestine was able to import German goods that it desperately needed. Some 20,000 German Jews availed themselves of this plan, and $30 million moved from Germany to the Yeshuv. This is all, to me, just absolutely incredible. And this was sort of the last window, because after 39 in 1940, 41, 42, it was too late for them to get out. This was a limited time offer, as they say. Roger, you want to read this one?
Yeah,
Tell us, guys, if you can hear him okay.
Can you hear me?
Everybody, you're muted, so because we're getting background noise.
I can hear him.
Okay.
Okay, so
Here we are.
Ben Gurion is up top, and the guy down below is Jabotinsky. Okay.
Job.
Java.
Yeah, is Germany writing tight? Is that supposed to be tightened or right?
Sorry, it tightened the news.
Okay, the noose around the Jews. The transfer agreement became increasingly controversial. Arosov, then he said, had made a pact with the devil.
So this is the problem, is that the politicians mocked him for doing this. And it's like, you're making a deal with the devil in the pale moonlight. He's like, no, I'm trying to save lives. And they're like, well, we had a boycott on German goods. That's why they keep coming back to him and said, you're a traitor. You've made a deal with the devil.
You put $30 million more in the hands of the Germans to use. That's how they're looking at it.
Right. So keep reading, sorry.
Ben Gurion defended the plan as a means of sustaining the issue while increasing immigration, but others believed that Germany had to be boycotted and that the transfer agreement would undermine the boycott's impact.
Jabotinsky,
Jabotinsky rallied against.
the transfer agreement.
Oh, that's the.
I was typing fast when I put all this in. I gotta go.
Transfer agreement. He thought it a foolhardy attempt to undermine Germany's economic isolation.
So Jabotinsky was pretty nasty guy. Ben Gurion supported it because he's like, we need to get Jews here. We're building a state. And he saw the need of them to get out of Europe. Everybody saw the need of them to get out of Europe. So it was quite a situation. Leah, you want to read this one?
Mhm.
And it has its high. Good.
The revisionist newspaper, Azet Hayam, the People's Front, ran a column on June 16, 1933, condemning Olossorov's agreement, a warning that the Jewish people will know how to respond to this odious act. The article personally identified Arlosorov. Later that same night, Chaim Arlosorov and his wife, Sima, went for a stroll on a Tel Aviv beach. Out of the dark, two men approached, one shining.
I typed this in the dark and very fast.
Shining a flashlight in Arlosorov's face while the other pulled a gun and fired. Arlosorov was rushed to the hospital but died a few hours later on the operating table. Who's that guy?
That's Alorosov. He was the guy who had set up the transfer agreement or the
Oh, okay.
Havara.
He was in that last picture that wasn't on the last slide.
Yeah, a little older.
Yeah, 2 slides back, whatever, that guy.
That guy.
Oh, okay.
On the right, yeah.
That's him as a younger man. And that's him a little bit older.
Mhm.
So it's Jabotinsky again, and it's Olosarov is the other guy. So Fonda, Cody, do you want to read this one? Sorry, what's wrong?
Oh, you wanted me to pick the people.
Oh, go ahead.
No, sorry, I just gotta keep them in the right order, so I know.
Okay.
Fonda. Are you there?
Fonda.
I'm here.
Here we go.
Sorry, it took me a while.
Yeah.
So it's Jabotinsky.
Jabotinsky's revisionist party was immediately blamed for the murder. 2 days later, Abraham Starsky, a member of the revisionist movement, Organization Bitar was arrested after Sima identified him as the man with the flashlight.
So in other words, when they were walking on the beach, they were accosted by 2 guys. One held a flashlight, the other guy shot him. So the wife, Olorosov's wife, Sima, identified him as the man who shot her husband. Well, was holding the flashlight with the guy who shot her husband.
Is that
2
him there?
other revisionists were arrested, one as an accomplice and the other as the gunman.
Right. So the situation was all over the map because don't forget who's ruling Palestine at this moment.
English.
The English, Great Britain. So continue reading, Fonda.
Stavsky, initially convicted and sentenced to death, was freed July 1934 when his conviction was overturned by the British Court of Appeals in Palestine. No one was ever convicted of the crime, and Arlosov's assassination remains a mystery. His murder would not be the last time Jews killed Jews over political agreements in the Jewish state.
Should be disagreements, sorry. But it's an amazing story of what happened here because he did so much to make this happen. So I do want you to remember Abraham, and it's Arlo Sorovs is his last name. He's a Ukrainian. And again, he was the one who got a PhD in economics from Germany. His girlfriend was this lady back here, Magda, and she's the one who gave him the phone numbers of the high command so he could make this transfer agreement happen. But 20,000 people is not shabby. That's a lot of peeps to get out of a country at the last minute.
Yeah, it is.
So next I want to talk about this guy. I practically cry when I say his name because this man was never fully recognized for all he did. I would say, as a rough estimate, he got 220,000 Hungarian Jews out of Hungary in 1944, a year before the war would end. That is impressive by any standard. And he did all he could. He was from a very wealthy family in Sweden. They were diplomats and bankers. But his achievements were unprecedented, and he did not see the light of day after the war was over. He was captured by the Russians. Nobody to this day know what's really happened to him. So with that, Walter, who's our next reader?
All right, we're gonna start at the bottom of the list this night, so we
Okay.
get around to some. So Susie, you're at the bottom of the list, go first
Do it,
for it.
Raoul Wallenberg. Go ahead, Sandy. Sorry.
I was muted, sorry.
Yes.
Raoul Wallenberg, 1912, was a Swedish diplomat who saved the lives of tens of thousands of Jews in Budapest in the second half of 1944. With the support of the World Jewish Congress and the American War Refugee Board, the Swedish Foreign Ministry sent Wallenberg to Budapest in July 1944 to help protect the 200,000 Jews who remained in the capital. Wow. Let Gerald read.
All right, Gerald.
From October 15th, when the Arrow Cross seized power, to the liberation of the capital 3 months later, Wallenberg saved Jews through a variety of means: by issuing thousands of protective documents, by establishing the international ghetto of protected houses, and by securing their release from deportation trains, death march convoys, and the labor service brigades, all at significant risk to himself.
So this guy made up Swedish passports because Sweden was what kind of country during World War II? Similar to Switzerland.
Neutral.
Neutral. They were a neutral country. They were not involved. And so he made up passports for 220,000 Jews, passed them out and said, here's your new name, Alice Martin. You better run with it. They all had to run with it. He gave them new names and said they were Swedish citizens and they were coming back to his country. So, and he was unbelievably bold. Dressed in just his suit, he would show up at these death marches and come up to the SS officers and say, "What are you doing? These are my people." And handing out the passports as he's walking along, get these people, said, "I want that truck, put them on that truck." And he would haul them out of there and save them from a death march. That's what kind of gutsy guy this John Wayne doesn't have anything on this guy. Your best NFL football player ain't got nothing on this guy. Your best warrior has nothing on Raoul Wallenberg. This guy is off the charts. And he just worked nonstop to make this happen. He set up his own embassy that was a fake embassy and just put flags all over it. All these houses that he bought, and he just put Swedish flags all over the whole dang thing and said, "You can't come in here. It's neutral. This is our embassy." And he crowded it with hundreds of Jews. I mean, this guy's gutsy. So this is his home in Sweden. It's not something small. So Raoul Wallenberg was born on August the 4th, 1912 in Stockholm, Sweden. After studying in the United States, where in Michigan, he established himself a business career in Sweden. Wallenberg was recruited by the U.S. War Refugee Board in 1944 to travel to Hungary. How late are we in this war now? It started in 1939 on the international scale, and now we're in 1944, the last quarter of 1944. In a football game, this would be what time period?
Fourth quarter.
We're in the fourth quarter. Given status as a diplomat by the Swedish legation, Wallenberg's task was to do what he could to assist to save Hungarian Jews. He not only accomplished his mission, he died doing this mission.
He looks Jewish.
He's Swedish. What are you talking about?
It doesn't sound like that.
Okay, so assigned as the first secretary of the Swedish litigation in Hungary, Wallenberg arrived in Budapest on 9 July 1944. I don't even remember what was VE Day in World War II.
April 15th, 1945 for Germany, and August 12th, 1945 for Japan, I think.
Awesome. So he's only got let's see, 5 months plus 4 months is in 9 months. And the amount of time it takes to birth a baby, he had to get 220,000 Jews out of Hungary. I mean, that's just incredible. Despite the complete lack of experience in diplomacy and clandestine operations, he led one of the most expensive and successful rescue efforts during the Holocaust. His work with the Refugee War Board prevented the deportation of thousands of Hungarian Jews. So, Walter, who's next?
Patsy.
Let me ask, why was he captured by Russians? Why would they?
Okay, so when the war happens, we come in from Normandy and we're going east. The
Yeah.
Russians are coming from the west, coming from the east, going west. So because Bulgaria, Romania, and all those countries are far Eastern Europe, Russians got to them first. So when they liberated, Hungary from the Nazis, they decided who's a criminal and who's not, and who to arrest and who not, who to kill and whatnot. They didn't consult the Americans. So or the Europeans for that matter. So they took Raoul Wallenberg away. You're going to find out what happens. So it's coming. Walter, who's next?
Patsy.
Patsy. Let me go to the next slide. Sorry. Are you there, Patsy?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you need to. There's three bullets for you to read on the death marches.
Okay. Hungary had been an ally of Germany, but Germany defeats and Mountain Hungarian losses lead Hungary to seek an armistice with the Western allies. To forestall these peace feelers, Germany forced occupied Hungary on March 19, 1944, and forced the Hungarian head of state, Malakas Harthy, to appoint a pro-German government under Dom Strozsé. Strozsé's government was prepared not only to continue the war, but also deport Hungarian Jews to German-occupied Poland. Shortly after the occupation, Hungarian officials began to round up Hungarian Jews and transfer them into German custody.
So the Jews' biggest fear in every country where they were captured, whether it was France or Belgium or Norway or any of the Czechoslovakia, Rome, what have you, was that they were going to be deported to these death camps that they only had a small inkling of. The full vision of where they were being taken and what was going to happen to them was never known, because no Jews really escaped to go back to these German Jewish communities and tell them it's really bad there. They had no idea until they arrived, and we know about it because of what happened in 1945 when Eisenhower came in. The Americans really didn't have a full picture, not on the populist level. I'm sure the government knew, but the rest of the people didn't know until it was all over. Who's next, Walter?
Len and Mandy are next.
Okay.
By July 1944, the Hungarians and the Germans had deported nearly 440,000 Jews from Hungary, almost all of them to Auschwitz-Birkenau, where the SS killed approximately 320,000 of them upon arrival and deployed the rest at forced labor in Auschwitz and other camps. Nearly 200,000 Jews remained in Budapest. The Hungarian authorities intended to deport them as well, in compliance with the German requests. One thing, Joe, when you were talking about what the Russians did when they came into from the east, Mandy and I paid our respects at Buchenwald And that basically was kept as a Russian concentration camp after the war to keep people that they didn't like in that camp. It was brutal.
How did you see that?
I was over in Germany for 4 months on I had a developmental assignment over there, and I was in Wiesbaden. And it's really something, because when you go to Germany and walk the streets, they have these things called stumblestones, and they're these bronze brick-sized implants in the cobblestones with the Jewish name, the name of the Jewish family that was taken from the residence that is adjacent that stumblestone. So you walk along the sidewalk, you look at a stumblestone, you look up, there's a house, and there's the name of the Jewish family, the date it was taken out of the home, where it went, and when they died.
Wow, that's so incredible, because that goes along with the verse that says, I present a stumbling block to the Jews.
And they are called stumblestones.
Yeah, they're called stumblestones. The other thing too is where we were in Germany, and I don't want to derail your discussion, but where we were in Wiesbaden, there was a very famous temple that was destroyed on Kristallnacht, where you could hear the noise from that area. So during Kristallnacht, there was no doubt where we were staying, people would have heard the screaming of the people.
That's unbelievable. It makes you sick, but this guy is sending it at the last minute. So these two bullets, what I'm trying to show you is what had happened by the time, thank you, Raoul Wallenberg arrived. So before he got there, 440,000 people were sent to their death. They send in Raoul Wallenberg, and how many are left? About 200 to about 220,000 Jews who are still left. And he saves how many? That many. So you're like, once you put Raoul Wallenberg into Budapest, he stopped the hemorrhaging completely and got the rest of the Jews basically a stay of execution so that they wouldn't be captured. So his effectiveness was 100%. If they'd sent him in earlier, he probably could have saved 440,000 on top of his 200,000. It would have been more than 500,000. So that little first bullet is just to tell you that's how many didn't make it, because Raoul Wallenberg wasn't there.
There had to be witnesses.
Yeah, there were. So this is him in his office there in his own self-proclaimed, Swedish embassy in Budapest, Hungary. Did you want to read? Who's our next reader?
Mandy.
Mandy, go ahead, Mandy.
Elder.
All right. Rescue activities. With authorization from the Swedish government, Wallenberg began distributing certificates of protection issued by the Swedish legation to Jews in Budapest shortly after his arrival in the Hungarian capital. He used WRB and Swedish funds to establish hospitals, nurseries, and a soup kitchen, and to design more than 30 safe houses that together formed the core of the International Ghetto in Budapest. The International Ghetto was reserved for Jews and their families holding certificates of protection from a neutral country.
So it's just amazing how this man's mind worked. He immediately was like, we've got to get the presses going. We got to start making these passports. We have to get all these houses that are abandoned and start turning them into safe houses. And we need a list of names, and we need all these other things like nurseries, a soup kitchen, a hospital, a school. All this stuff had to be done in order for him to save these people. And he's one man with a very small staff. And it's just unreal what he can accomplish. So he's a real inspiration to me, as I'm like, how can one man do all of this?
Wow, he must be really a go-getter if he's an inspiration to you, Joseph. Energizer bunny.
Well, thank you. He just blows my mind. I wish I could. I hope I get to meet him in the kingdom, because man, he is incredible. Go ahead with our next reader, Walter.
Sister Joanne, you're up next.
Rescue activities. After the Hungarian fascist Arrow Cross moved, seized power with the help of the Germans on October 15, 1944, the Arrow Cross government resumed the deportation of Hungarian Jews with Hortley and had halted in July before the Budapest Jews could be deported. As Soviet troops had already cut off rail transport routes to Auschwitz, Hungarian authorities forced tens of thousands of Budapest Jews to march west to the Hungarian border with Austria.
So what happened is that all the railroads had been confiscated by the Allies, so they couldn't transport them anymore. So instead, they had the genius idea of doing a death march. These people were already malnourished, hungry, and sick. And so they made a march. If you were too slow at the back of the line, you got shot. Your bodies were just left on the roadside. So Wallenberg had to act very quickly. So the Hungarian fascists, called the Arrow Cross movement, they're basically just a puppet government like the Vichy government was for France. The Cross Arrow was to Hungary. So these people were more than willing to get rid of the Jews because they were forced to do so. But Raoul Wallenberg turned around a lot of this. So we'll go into the next slide. Who's our next reader? And this is the Parliament building in Budapest, Hungary, which is just gorgeous. It survived the war because it was never bombed. But these are the other key figures who worked with Raoul Wallenberg to help him accomplish this massive mission. Who's our next reader?
Mike Carty, are you available?
He's still under the weather. He had tested positive for RSV.
Oh, bummer. All right. David or Nancy, are y'all available?
Read it.
Go ahead, Fonda.
Oh, there's
Nancy's available. Yeah.
Wallenberg's colleagues in the Swedish legation and diplomats from other neutral countries also participated in rescue operations. Karl Lutz, the consul general in the Swiss legation, issued certificates of immigration, placing nearly 50,000 Jews in Budapest under Swiss protection as potential immigrants to Palestine. Italian businessman Giorgio Perlasco posed as a Spanish diplomat, closely assisted by Lazio and Eugenia Zamosi. Perlasco issued to many Jews in Budapest certificates of protection for nations whose interest neutral Spain represented and established safe houses, including one for Jewish children.
So people were inspired by him and they picked up on what he had done. This Italian guy, Giorgio Perlasca, basically, he starts saying, I'm a Spanish diplomat and here's my safe house and I'm going to send you back to Palestine. And this other guy, Karl Lutz, does the same thing. He's like, I'm from Sweden and I'm going to send you to Palestine. So these guys were awesome copycats and they were helping him and they were posing as other diplomats from other what kind of countries?
Sure.
Neutral countries. So one's representing Switzerland, one's Swedish, and the other one's Spanish. They all begin with S. They're all neutral. You can remember them: Sweden, Switzerland, and Spain. So all three of them were of the same notion to issue false passports, false safe houses, and get them out of the country and send them back to Palestine. So absolutely incredible what they accomplished. Who's our next reader, Walter?
Linda Marie, you ready?
Linda.
After the liberation of Budapest, when Soviet forces liberated Budapest in February 1945, more than 100,000 Jews remained, mostly because of the efforts of Wallenberg and his colleagues. Wallenberg was last seen in the company of Soviet officials on January 17, 1945, as the Red Army viewed this term
in the glossary.
The siege of Budapest. He was presumably detained on suspicion of espionage and subsequently disappeared. The Soviet government report in 1956 suggested that Wallenberg had died on July 17, 1947, while imprisoned by Soviet authorities at the infamous
Lubyanka.
Yanka prison in Moscow.
Lubyanka.
Subsequent eyewitness sightings of Wallenberg in the Soviet penal system after 1947 have called this statement into question. The exact date and circumstances of Wallenberg's death are unknown and may never be clarified. In October 2016, 71 years after his disappearance, Swedish officials formally declared Wallenberg legally dead.
Yeah, so the point of this is that he started on July 9th, 1944. He was arrested by the Soviets on January 17th, 1945. So he basically had 6 months to save 220,000 people. I think that's pretty remarkable. So it's unreal what he accomplished, and nobody ever knows what happened to him. He just disappeared off the map. The Soviets took him, and that was the end of it. And there was, I think, about 4 or 5 separate inquiries by this Swedish government to find out what really happened to him, and they still don't have any straight answers.
Maybe he was able to stay in hiding until the day he died.
I know he was captured he was captured as soon as they rolled into the Soviets rolled into Budapest.
Mhm. Yeah, but what about after the war was over?
That's what I was saying. It's the liberation, because they ended it. The war practically ended for Hungary, even though Germany hadn't been completely defeated. It ended for them in January of 45. Anyway, so these are just some of the many monuments and streets and statues and dedicated gardens that were all done for Raoul Wallenberg around the world. So I think this one of them is in his hometown, one is in Budapest. There's several more of them. One's breaking through barriers on the right-hand side. There's a bust of him in another location, and there's a print in stone on another. So, and the Jews, basically crouching before him. So it's pretty amazing. But we've all heard of this guy, Oskar Schindler, which was another path to get out, a very unlikely person because he wasn't particularly noble. He wasn't a successful businessman until the war. The Jews basically helped him to become a successful businessman, and he was a huge philanderer, gambler, and drinker. So, I mean, he had all that going on, but he had an empathetic heart towards God's people, and God chooses whoever he will as instruments for what he's going to accomplish. So, Walter, who do we have reading next?
All right, it's my turn now.
Okay.
Oskar Schindler was born on April 28, 1908 in Sitzve, Zitowa, Moravia, at that time a province of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy. An ethnic German and a Catholic, he remained in Sitzve during the interview period and held Czech citizenship after Moravia was incorporated into the newly established Czechoslovakia Republic in 1918. After attending a series of trade schools in Brno and marrying Emily Tetzel in 1928, Schindler held a variety of jobs, including working in his father's farm machinery business in Svesve, opening a driving school in Schompeck, and selling government property in Brno. He also served in the Czechoslovakian army, and in 1938 attained the rank of Lance Corporal in the reserve. Schindler began working with the Ahmed Auslands Abwehr, Office of the Military Foreign Intelligence of the German Armed Forces in 1936. In February of 1939, 5 months after the Germans' annexation of the Sudetenland, viewed this term in the glossary, he joined the Nazi Party an opportunist businessman with a taste for the finer things in life. He seemed an unlikely candidate to become a wartime rescuer. During World War II, Schindler would rescue more than 1,000 Jews from deportation to Auschwitz, Nazi Germany's largest camp complex.
So, I mean, this, if you put them on a scale, the first one was Arlosov. He got 20,000 Jews out of Germany in the early years. Then this guy, Oskar Schindler, only saved 1,000. He gets a huge movie by Spielberg and all this stuff. And
Yeah.
and then Raoul Wallenberg, who saved over 220,000, doesn't
Nobody
even get.
knows his name.
I know. Nobody knows his name hardly. There was a movie about him. It's very hard to get access to actually see it, but anyway. So who's up next? This is his factory, by the way, on the right-hand side that you see in the movie that he used to bring the Jews in and out of. And he did some really smart things to make this happen. First of all, you wouldn't want to ever say this, but he joined the Nazi Party. And he became friends with them because you have to make your enemies close to you so you can get the inside information. He wined and dined them because he could lubricate their lips by pouring liquor down their throats. Once you get them drunk, they'll say anything that they're not supposed to say. And then he got the inside scoop of what was actually going on. So he bought this factory with Jewish money and was able to save Jewish lives on, it's called Amialia. So anyway, the factory was pretty new when he bought it, and it's amazing. So who's our next reader?
We're back to Leah.
Okay.
Amalia. Following the German invasion and occupation of Poland, Schindler moved to Krakow from Wittowie in October 1939, taking advantage of the German occupation program to Aryanize and Germanize Jewish-owned and Polish-owned businesses in the so-called general government.
I don't know why
General
this.
government.
I don't know why this term in the glossary. I didn't type any of that. I don't know how I got up in here.
He
Anyway.
bought Record Ltd. Limited, a Jewish-owned enamelware manufacturer, in November 1939. He converted this plant to establish the Dusch Emelwaren fabric Oskar Schindler, German enamel factory Oskar Schindler, also known as Amalia. Entrance to the Oskar Schindler's enamel works in Zablocki, a suburb of Krakow, Poland, 1939 to 1944.
So what's amazing to me is he buys this factory, and I'm going to show you the site, and you're going to be blown away. So Krakow, it's funny because there's pictures of it as a tourist destination in the 1920s. Come to Krakow. And I'm like, now you think of that name and you're like, why would anybody go to Krakow? Because of what happened there. So this is what's fascinating. This is a map showing you where Schindler's factory site was. It is right across the railroad tracks from the Jewish ghetto and within a stone's throw, basically, of the concentration camp. So he put his, he chose well when he chose that factory in Krakow because he was basically able to get the Jews right next to his factory, whether they were in the ghetto or whether they were in the concentration camp. And later he created his own like camp to move them there so that he could have direct control and protection of his people. And he wouldn't let the Germans in to see what was going on, which is fairly brilliant. Who's our next reader? Roger, go ahead.
While Schindler operated 2 other factories in Krakow, only in Amelia did he employ Jewish workers who resided in the nearby Krakow ghetto. At its peak strength in 1944, Amelia employed 1,700 workers. At least 1,000 were Jewish forced laborers, whom the Germans had relocated from the Krakow ghetto after its liquidation in March 1943 to the forced labor camp and later concentration camp, Krakow Plazow. Although the prisoners deployed at Amelia were still subject to brutal conditions of the Plazow concentration camp, Schindler intervened repeatedly on their behalf. He used bribes and personal diplomacy, both of the well-being of Jews threatened on an individual basis, and to ensure until late 1944 that the SS did not deport his Jewish workers. In order to claim the Jewish workers to be essential to the war effort, he added an armaments manufacturing division in Amelia. During the liquidation of the Krakow ghetto in that March 1943, Schindler allowed his Jewish workers to stay at the factory overnight.
So it's pretty incredible how many lives he was able to save, given that he had to keep his enemies close while helping the Jews out at the same time. This required utmost diplomacy, tact, and decorum to pull this thing off. Guess how many times he was arrested by the Nazis? 4 times. And he talked his way out of all 4. And it's just like unbelievable. So our next reader is?
We're back to Susie and Gerald.
Okay. Gerald?
Okay. The rogue Oscar Schindler. After the SS redesignated Plazow as a concentration camp in August of 1943, Schindler persuaded the SS to convert Emalia into a subcamp of Plazow. In addition to the approximately 1,000 Jewish forced laborers registered as factory workers, Schindler permitted 450 Jews working in other nearby factories to live at Emalia as well.
Okay, let's stop there for 1 second. Let me ask you a quick question about World War II history. Were children allowed to go into work camps or death camps?
Yes,
What happened to them when they were there?
they put them to work.
Most of the time they were exterminated because they weren't strong enough to, and they weren't going to grow when they weren't being fed anything. So what did Oscar Schindler do? Why did he have to create the second camp?
He housed the children.
Right. So then he had to come up with an excuse as to why he had to have children work at his factory, which wasn't common. And in the movie, you actually see that because he finds out a whole train that was destined for him didn't come to Krakow. They were sent to Auschwitz. So he drives his car all the way there, gets there by the time the train unloads, and yells at the SS officers and says, "Do you know what you've done?" And he grabs one of the little kids and he shows them the kid's hands. He's like, only these hands can get up inside the shell casing of a munition and clean it. What am I going to do if you get rid of my kids? So he brings them back, and it's just like, my gosh, you have to have the guts of, I don't know what to make this happen. So he really did try to protect them over and over again, and at serious peril and risk to himself. Oh, sorry, I didn't finish reading that. Go ahead.
Yeah, one point about Schindler, it's noted that he was ethnic German and also Catholic by religion, which, those 2 counts are very much anti-Semitic. Religiously, the Catholics hate the Jews because the Jews are accused of being Christ killers, and so on. So
a false
amazing how he develops this affinity for the Jewish people. Is it just out of a humanitarian disposition that he has, or what motivates him to do this for the Jewish people, do you think? Did it ever come out?
It was because his accountant was Jewish, and he basically raised the idea. So yeah, go ahead, Leah.
I mean, for the kind of person that he was, it almost seems as if the Spirit of God was the only thing that was really driving him.
Yeah, God was in it, no doubt.
In
Because it was up, because no one would have suspected him of being,
He was so worldly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, nobody would think he had any gentle motives. Go ahead.
Lynn has something to say, I think.
Yeah, at the Buchenwald prison camp, like in the Auschwitz, you had a picture of Auschwitz, and it had an entrance gatehouse, if you will. The same thing occurred also at Buchenwald, and to the left and right, they had this left and right wing portion. They had these little private cells where they were called the interrogation cells, and every single one had a memorial to a Christian minister or priest who was basically interrogated and tortured to death to disclose what they were doing for this, to hide and protect Jews. But both wings are like a tribute to the men that died protecting Jews, and all of them were either Lutherans, Catholics, whatever predominant Christian faith was over there in Europe.
Mhm.
That's excellent. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Did you go to Mathausen or whatever it's called?
No, we got to Weimar, which was actually Weimar is in the eastern part of Germany. It is the foundational area where Nazism grew. It was a place of, as they say, high culture and education. So much for that. But yeah, that was the only one we made it to. We didn't have a chance. There was Dachau, which is in Munich, and Auschwitz, which is in Poland, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So we're almost done with this, and then we're going to stop for the night. Did we finish reading this one?
No.
Right in the middle of
Okay,
it.
go ahead.
So I'll go ahead. This saved them from the systematic brutality and arbitrary murder that was part of daily life in Passau. Schindler did not act here without risk or cost. His protection of his Jewish workers and some of his shady business dealings led SS and police authorities to suspect him of corruption and of giving unauthorized aid to Jews. German SS and police officials arrested him 3 times while he owned Emalia, but were unable to charge him.
Yeah, it's amazing what he was able to get away with in these situations, because he kept it very quiet. For the sake of time, I'm going to finish this up so I can get through it. Thank you for reading. In October 1944, after the SS transferred Amelia to Jews to Paslow, Schindler sought and maintained authorization to relocate his plant to Berizi in Moravia, and reopened it exclusively as an armaments factory. So he basically told the Jews who were making armaments there, he says, I don't want one of these to work because we're selling them to Germany. So they made nothing but duds. One of his assistants drew several versions of a list into 1,200 Jewish prisoners who needed to be worked at his new factory. This list came to be known collectively as Schindler's List. Schindler met the specifications required by the SS to classify Brunlitz as the subcamp of the Rosen concentration camp, and thereby facilitated the survival of about 800 Jewish men whom the SS deported to Plazow via Rosen to Brunlitz, and between 300 to 400 Jewish women from Pavlov via Auschwitz. So absolutely incredible that he was able to move all the factory and all the people in 1944, almost at the end of the war. Though the classifications of armament factories, the Brunlitz plant produced just 1 wagon load of live ammunition in just under 8 months of operation. That's what we call pathetic work ethic. And all of those were duds. By presenting bogus production figures, Schindler justified the existence of the subcamp as an armaments factory. This facilitated the survival of over 1,000 Jews, sparing them the horrors and brutality of conventional camp life. Schindler left Brunlitz only on May 9th, 1945, the day that Soviet troops liberated the camp. So the picture down below are the surviving Jews today. That's them in Jerusalem around Oskar Schindler's grave.
Wow.
After World War II, Schindler and his wife Emile settled in Regensburg, Germany until 1949, when they immigrated to Argentina. In 1957, permanently separated but not divorced from Emile, Schindler returned alone to Germany. Schindler died in Germany, penniless and almost unknown, in October 1974. Many of those who survived, he facilitated, and their descendants lobbied for finance the transfer of his body for burial in Israel. And I think that's the last one
Was
for
that
him.
him? Was that him?
Yeah, it was. That's Oscar Schindler. Also in 1993, the United States Holocaust Memorial Council posthumously presented the museum's Medal of Remembrance to Schindler. Rarely presented, this medal honors deserving recipients for extraordinary deeds during the Holocaust and in the cause of the remembrance. Emile Schindler accepted the medal on behalf of her ex-husband as a ceremony of the museum's Hall of Remembrance. So we'll continue on next week, but we'll stop there tonight. Roger, if you want to give a closing prayer.
Great and loving Heavenly Father, we thank you once again for being reminded of all your workings through history, and the things that you've done, and your prophecies coming to pass. And as horrible it is, we know that one day that Israel will never again deal with those kind of things. And how you brought your people, are still bringing your people back to Israel to become a great nation and will eventually accept your son. Until that day, Father, keep us diligent and always working in your fields. And thank you for the information we've got to see tonight, to remember this history that happened so long ago. We ask you to be with us now as we go our separate ways, and till we meet again. In Jesus' name.
Amen. So thank you all for coming tonight.
Thank you so much for putting all that together.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks for the effort, Joe.
Hey, Joe, piece of trivia. If you ever remember, for those who can remember, Hogan's Heroes, the comedy show.
Yes.
Robert, all right, so you had a French captive in the prison called LeBeau.
Yeah, LeBeau.
His name was Robert Clary.
Yep.
Robert Clary survived the Buchenwald prison camp.
Wow, didn't know that.
Unbelievable.
12, 13, 14 years old. And the irony is that, so he played the French captive, both the person who played Sergeant Schultz and the colonel were both Jewish.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And it was like a way of really poking in the eye of the people that, went after your
That
people.
was John Banner, was his name.
Yeah, they were Jewish. So just figured I'd just let you know. It's interesting how things work out in the hand of the Almighty works in people's lives.
Oh, yeah.
No doubt.
Without a doubt, because there's just so many amazing coincidences, like Arlosov, having a girlfriend in Germany and using her as a contact to make the transfer agreement. That just blows my mind. So anyway, well, be ready for the rains tomorrow.
Yeah,
Nicole will be
coming.
visiting all of us.
Where's that picture from, Joseph?
I'm trying to tell what it is.
It's a confluence of two creeks.
What is this?
But
Looks like a
which
piece
one?
of.
It's an old tank, yes, and on the far right is another vehicle.
You know where it's from?
I
And
don't
it's
know.
the house, the chimney. And
It's like Savannah area or something.
That's what I
That
was.
was it.
That's what I
Must have been about
Black.
Did you see?
Where would you get a picture like
house.
this? What is it?
It's a screensaver,
Yeah.
but I can try to send it to you.
And the other part of the house.
Do you know
over
what
here.
it is? I mean, I see it. Who would take a picture like that and make a screensaver out of it? That's what I'm wondering.
A great photographer.
Yeah, I'm not sure where it was, but I'll try to send it to you if I can. But it's I'm trying to think of where the image is from. I apologize because I usually
Okay.
have it.
I'm just curious. It's just an odd thing.
Thank you for class,
Good
Brother
night.
Joe.
Thanks.
Thank
Joe.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good.
everyone.
Good to hear all you guys tonight.
It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. So thanks for being here. So we'll see you Thursday of next week, and then the Thursday of Thanksgiving, I'm assuming nobody's coming, so we'll say when that one's canceled.
Yep.
So I think we've got next week and the week after, or no, it's just the next week, I think.
Yeah.
Just next week, and then that'll be it until the last week, November.
And you can all dress up like these Jewish heroes at Joe's masquerade party on Saturday night.
Yep, it's from 7 to 11 and you can show up. If you don't feel like wearing a costume, you can just wear a little name tag that says, I'm a Gibeonite. I was 16 years old when I left home. If you like that idea better. Well, anyway, you all have a great evening. It was good seeing you. Good night.
See you too. We appreciate all the crazy, energetic work that you get done.